Right, okay. So my name is Ahmed Hankir. I'm actually chair of Leeds Working Group Muslim Engagement and Development, and we're an organization that challenges Islamophobia. You may have heard of us before. Yeah. I'm also a research fellow with the Bedfordshire Centre for Mental Health Research in association with the University of Cambridge, and I'm an associate professor of psychiatry at the Carrick Institute for Graduate Studies in Cape Canaveral, which is pretty sweet because they pay for me to go over there to deliver a keynote lecture, and I get sun-kissed on the coast of Cocoa Beach. Actually, I was invited to deliver an anti-Islamophobia program after the terrorist attack that was perpetrated by Omar Mateen and the subsequent spike in anti-Muslim hate crime. And I'm very pleased to inform you that it was received positively by people across the political spectrum, so Trump and non-Trump supporters alike. And that was interesting when I was there, because I never met a Trump supporter before. So I was like, is that what you look like? I didn't think I was going to make it into the US, because this is when Trump issued the executive order. So, when you're going, I was in Manchester Airport. I know I digress, but I'd like to share this anecdote with you. You're in Manchester Airport and people are going through the barrier and security, whatever. And then, you put your ticket on the screen or whatever, and then it says random security check. So it's quite an interesting experience. But anyway. So the title of my talk is Muslim Perceptions of British Combat Troops. Okay. So on the 22nd of May, 2017, suicide bomber Salman Abidi detonated an improvised explosive device in a concert by American singer Ariana Grande in the Manchester Arena, killing 22 people, including an 8-year-old girl, and maiming 116 others. The massacre in Manchester was the worst terrorist attack on British soil since the London suicide bombings on the 7th of July 2005. Muslim communities throughout the UK have resolutely rejected the multitude of absurd claims that such heinous actions have any place in Islam, and have expressed their deepest condolences to the families and the loved ones of all those who were affected by the explosion. Indeed, multiple members of the Muslim community in Manchester reported Salman Abidi to the British intelligence services on at least 5 separate occasions before he executed his horrific attack due to their concerns about the extremist views that he was expressing and their forebodings that he posed an imminent threat to Muslims and non-Muslims alike. Now, leaders of all the political parties in the UK suspended their campaigns for the general election following the callous and cowardly bombing that caused horror and outrage throughout the world. The leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, however, controversially resumed electioneering soon after the atrocity. The former chair of the Stop the War coalition emphatically exclaimed in a general election campaign speech that many experts, including professionals in our intelligence and security services, have pointed to the connection between wars our government has supported or fought in other countries and terrorism here at home. Now, Corbyn's claims, controversial and contentious though they may be, are not unfounded, especially if one considers what the terrorists themselves have said and indeed continue to say about what motivates them to carry out their abhorrent activities. On the 22nd of May 2013, British serviceman Lee Rigby was brutally attacked and decapitated by Michael Adibolaji and Michael Adibowali near the Royal Artillery Barracks in Woolwich, south-east London. The perpetrators of this abominable act told passers-by at the scene that they wanted to avenge the killing of Muslims by the British armed forces. Indeed, militants of, and those inspired by, terrorist organizations like Daesh repeatedly report that what motivates them to carry out their heinous atrocities are British military operations in Muslim-majority countries. Daesh is a terrorist organization founded by Abu Mus'ab al-Zarqawi in 1999 and based in the Levant, primarily controlling territory in Iraq and Syria. As of 2016, US officials estimate there are between 15,000 to 20,000 listed militants. Abu Mus'ab al-Zarqawi promulgated a vitriolic ideology that has no regard for the sanctity of human life, Muslim and non-Muslim alike. Indeed, the United Nations has designated Daesh as a terrorist organization and holds them reprehensible for human rights abuses and war crimes. Daesh's manifesto is anathema to the teachings of the Blessed Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Succinctly put, Daesh does not represent Islam. Most of Daesh's victims are Muslim, and most people engaged in combat against Daesh are Muslim. In the Holy Quran, it explicitly states, if you kill one human life, it is tantamount to killing the whole of humankind. Calling oneself a Muslim does not necessarily make that person Muslim, a fact which was not lost on a bystander of the Leytonstone tube station attack in 2015. The bystander, a non-Muslim named by the media only as John, coined the phrase, "You ain't no Muslim, bruv," in response to the fanatic Muhyiddin Meyer's ravings whilst he was being tasered and arrested by London Metropolitan Police. The phrase soon started to trend on Twitter, and the Prime Minister at the time, David Cameron, praised the commentator, declaring he had stated it all much better than I could have done. Acts like these have been collectively and categorically condemned by Muslim communities in Britain. Now, Muslims believe that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the prophet of God, and as such, he was the keeper of prophecies. Muhammad, peace be upon him, prophesied that terrorist organizations such as Daesh would sprout, and he issued the following clarion call about them. They are the worst of the creation. Blessed are those who fight them and are killed by them. They call to the book of Allah but have absolutely nothing to do with it. Whoever fights them is better to Allah than them. Now, the behavioral science units at the MI5 conducted a sophisticated, in-depth analysis based on hundreds of case studies, and they concluded that far from being Islamist fundamentalists, most terrorists are religious novices and do not practice their faith regularly. Some are involved in drug taking, drinking alcohol, and visiting prostitutes, all haram, prohibited in Islam. The MI5 reports that there is evidence that a well-established religious identity actually confers protection against violent radicalization. A leaked Daesh document exposed the personal details of over 4,000 militants who joined Daesh in 2013 and 2014. 70% of respondents described their knowledge of Islam as basic. Findings suggest that Daesh has twisted the Quran to serve its own brutal and un-Islamic ideology. I don't know if anyone recognizes this chap. This is Professor Sir Simon Wesley. He is president of the Royal Society of Medicine. He was president of the Royal College of Psychiatrists. He's an expert on military mental health. And Professor Wesley and colleagues at King's College London report that there was evidence to suggest that although the public was less supportive of the UK's military involvement in the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, their support of the armed forces themselves did increase. Now, the Social Research Institute, Ipsos Mori, and King's College London commissioned a survey entitled Hearts and Minds, Misperceptions in the Military. It was an international survey on perceptions of the military compared with reality. 5 countries, Australia, Canada, France, Great Britain, and the United States. And 5,000 interviews were conducted. So here are some of the extraordinary misperceptions. So 21% of the population in the UK is Muslim. That was participants recruited from the United Kingdom. But the reality is that there's only 5% of the population in the UK are Muslim. So these are some of the extraordinary misperceptions. So of the 1,000 participants who were recruited from the UK, can anyone hazard a guess how many were Muslim? 50%. No, 50 of the 1,000. Okay, so 0. I thought it was quite relevant and important to know how Muslims perceive the British Armed Forces. So we conducted a cross-sectional mixed method study on Muslims residing in the UK and their perceptions of British combat troops. And I presented my findings to the military officials at the Ministry of Defence in Whitehall in London. So I have pioneered an anti-stigma program entitled The Wounded Healer, which I have been fortunate enough to deliver to 50,000 people in 12 countries and 5 continents worldwide. And I have worked closely with Islamic societies throughout the United Kingdom, and I can tell you that these are the sweetest, most peaceful people I have ever met in my entire life. So this was an opportunity for me to recruit some participants. So people who attended the Wounded Healer performance were recruited to participate, and immediately following the delivery of the Wounded Healer, we hand-distributed paper questionnaires, because in our experience, it increases response rates. Answers were on a Likert type scale, and there was also space for free text comments, which were subjected to thematic analyses. 100% response rate, which we were quite pleased about. Sample size is 75. 100% of the respondents were Muslim, mean age of 20.5 years, and there were more female participants than male participants. Okay, so being Muslim means that you cannot be British. As you can see, majority of respondents either strongly disagreed or disagreed. So British military operations in Muslim majority countries has negatively influenced attitudes and views towards the British government. I don't think there are any surprises there. But you ask the same question about the combat troops, and you'll see, I think, the views were kind of more negative towards the government than they were towards the actual combat troops themselves. So Muslims should not enlist in the British Armed Forces due to military operations being conducted in Muslim majority countries, and you'll see a majority either agreed or strongly agreed with that construct. So here we have a normal distribution. The British Armed Forces are less likely to recruit Muslims. Being Muslim can reduce empathy towards British combat troops engaged in military operations in Muslim majority countries. Again, majority of respondents either agreed or strongly agreed. And being Muslim can increase empathy towards civilian casualties and deaths due to British combat troops engaged in military operations in Muslim majority countries. Again, a majority of respondents either agreed or strongly agreed. So media and film portrayals influence empathy towards British combat troops. I think that was quite an interesting finding that the military officials at the Ministry of Defence were particularly intrigued by. And I have an interest in stigma, and we know that Professor Patrick Corrigan is the world authority on stigma. He's based in Chicago. And he conducted a systematic review and meta-analysis on 13 randomized controlled trials, and he concluded that social contact with a member of the stigmatized group is the most effective way of reducing stigma. So, again, an interesting finding. A majority of respondents either agreed or strongly agreed that if they made contact with a veteran or someone who's actually serving in the armed forces, then it might actually increase empathy towards them. Okay, some of the free text comments. So, the soldiers are so brainwashed that they don't understand what they're doing. I think once they see the reality of what they're being told to do, most change their way. That was one of the recurrent themes. A motive was the brainwashing of combat troops. Again, I don't believe the actual soldiers are to blame. They are led to believe that what they're fighting for is a worthy cause. The troops are, of course, not primarily to blame. However, it is an obligation for every human being to research into the effects of their actions and the activities that they are participating in on disciplines, as reports and cases that come out show troops abusing, torturing, and humiliating prisoners out of their own boredom. The military is overextended and becoming seemingly unnecessary, as they are causing more harm than good, attacking more than protecting. There's another recurrent theme or motive, was the demonization of Muslims in the media, which is also a factor that contributes to Islamophobia. And I think it was Professor Baker at Lancaster University who conducted research on the portrayal of Muslims in the print media. And for every one term describing Muslims in a positive way, there were 23 terms describing Muslims in a negative way. It's so powerful that even when I go to the airport, I'm a Muslim, and if I see someone else having a beard, I start to get a little anxious. Oh, we've got 5 minutes left. Okay, oops, sorry. Yeah, that can be quite loquacious. Okay, racist, Islamophobic, ignorant, we're almost finished. The transcendental bond that Muslims have for each other throughout the world. Okay, so this is the kind of propaganda campaign that Daesh has launched. The British government is deeply concerned about Britons who have been recruited to join Daesh through a propaganda campaign. So up to 700 Britons have joined Daesh, reportedly. Now, the armed forces, the British government is exploring ways to recruit more Muslims to join the British armed forces, since the latest figures reveal that of the 160,000 personnel currently serving, only 650 are Muslim. Now, this is Asim Hafiz, and he argues that he's the Islamic advisor to the Chief of Staff. And he argues that the values of the British Armed Forces are fully compatible with the values of Islam, as well as other faiths. I can tell you as an insider, he's not the most popular imam in the Muslim community. Discussion, increase efforts to facilitate contact, enhance communication, and improve relations between Muslims residing in the UK and British Armed Forces. And if the British government, this is a TED Talk I recommend everyone watch by Dalia Mujahid. I don't know if anyone's ever seen it before. She argues that Muslims are like canaries in a coal mine. Although we are the first to feel it, the toxic fumes of fear are harming us all. Again, I spoke to you about the power of contact. If the British government is serious about challenging radicalization, it must take into consideration the perceptions that Muslims residing in the UK have towards them, their foreign policies, and their combat troops. The British government and its armed forces need to increase and improve efforts to reach out and engage with members of the Muslim community, domestically and abroad, particularly Muslim youth, by collaborating with organizations such as the Federation of Student Islamic Societies, the national umbrella organization aimed at supporting and representing Islamic societies at colleges and universities in the UK and Ireland. By addressing and rectifying the problems with our current foreign policy, Muslims might perceive the British Armed Forces as a legitimate branch of the government's Ministry of Defence, and not as aggressors who occupy Muslim-majority states. British Muslims may then feel duty-bound to protect their fellow citizens by joining the armed forces. Terrorist organizations have launched seductive propaganda campaigns to recruit foreign fighters. The British Armed Forces needs to enhance its recruitment strategy if they want to enlist more Muslims than the number of militants Daesh enrolls to defeat terrorism. And that's the president of the Federation of Student Islamic Societies in the center there, Zara. This is a British veteran, Chris Herbert, who sustained a non-fatal traumatic injury consequent to a tour of duty in Iraq. Thank you.